tears or is it happy? Welcome back to the other side of change, only on the Black Star Network. I am your host, Jamira Burley, joined by my co-host, Brea Baker. And today we are confronting a story that is both historic and heartbreakingly current. When the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, better known as ICE, detains, deports, and in many cases erases people from their communities.
Yeah. To your point, Jamira, it feels like there's nothing happy about this start to the year. I mean, this is about more than policy. It's about people going missing, loved ones never heard from again, family members unaware of where someone was taken, and relatives left with the question, did ICE take them? And if so, where are they now?
Yeah, when asking the central question, like how did an agency created to enforce immigration laws become an instrument of terror? Disappearing and the militarization of our policing echoes historical accounts of slave catchers and authoritarian regimes like the Nazis. And we're going to dig so deep into that, hopefully be able to explore it more with our guests and remind you all that this is a conversation that is just starting. It is so complex, and it's one that is devastatingly impacting communities across the country. But before we get into that, we're going to address the headlines. My first headline, unfortunately, is the Republicans reverse course on a war power vote and gives Trump unchecked authority in Venezuela. As you all are aware, Trump executed a military operation about a week and a half ago that captured the president and the first lady of Venezuela in an effort to get control of Venezuela's oil. They can claim whatever they want, but we heard Trump in his own words claim that they wanted the opportunity to get control of Venezuela oil. So they kidnapped the president and the first lady to try to control that. And now you have the Republicans who are saying that they don't care what the president does, that he has the authority to continue to have these type of operations whenever he wants to, if it means violating domestic and international law. We'll continue to check and see how this story unfolds, but I think it's reminiscent of colonial power and white supremacy in many ways, thinking that one country like the U.S. has the ability to just tell another country what to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's we're in this Y2K nostalgia era, and it really feels like the early 2000s when Bush was doing the same across the Middle East. Is like going after nations who are rich in resources. And listen, in the name of, I've seen this debate happening back and forth on, well, actually, this president has been engaging in human rights violations. And the point is that the U.S. is pretending to be a moral authority, but in actuality is looking to take advantage of the discord and the uncertainty to be in control of the oil at the end of the day. This is not something in service of the Venezuelan people, no matter how much people dislike or want Maduro out. There should be a process for Venezuelans to make their voices heard democratically, and we need to mind our business.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. Two things can be true at once, right? Yes, he can be a dictator. Yes, he can be violating Venezuelan law, meaning the president of Venezuela. At the same time, that does not give the United States authority over another country's sovereignty and to tell those people who should be their leader. We have seen time and time again, America infiltrating other countries and deciding who the leader of that country should be. And it has never ended well for that community. The resources are extracted, those communities are disenfranchised, and the money never comes back, right? Like Trump is now saying that we'll sell Venezuela oil and we'll keep that money in an offshore account that only I can control. All of that is suspect. And the reason why another country should not be able to come into another country and change its leader is because we have the international law for that. We have international courts for that. The U.S. doesn't, and the same courts that the U.S. has been denying and ignoring for the last 2 years as we've watched the genocide in Gaza unfold. So let's be real about the why and not just getting caught up in the fact that, yes, he was a bad leader. That doesn't mean that the U.S. has the authority to be able to replace it. So
because we have a bad leader, so who's going to come and take ours?
I know. Well, we want someone to kidnap Trump to kill innocent civilians and kidnap our president. Wink, wink. No, of course not.
Exactly. But I wish somebody would come and take this man. But unfortunately, we have to do that ourselves as American citizens, and we need to leave it to other nations to be able to do that themselves as well. Yeah. BS. But to go to the next headline, I try my best to find something positive, and New York City continues to offer up some really great moments to be proud of. Shout out to my city. Mayor Mamdani is on a roll already, has not even been in office for a full month, and is already making waves and making his promises come true, not just for his constituents, but actually for all across New York State. Mamdani campaigned on a plan to make childcare universal. New York City already had free childcare for children ages 3 and up. But his goal was to make that accessible for children at even younger ages. And he is doing that. He announced his plan to make childcare universal starting at age 2. And he got Governor Hochul on board to expand the free 3K program across the state of New York so that those living beyond the 5 boroughs will be able to benefit from this program. And I love to see this because we talked about this in a previous episode that last year, New Mexico kind of set a precedence on universal childcare across the state. Now New York is making moves, and I hope that this is the beginning of us actually being a country that cares about families and not just campaigning on it when it is convenient to white supremacists. So I'm really, really excited to see Mamdani prove that you can be a progressive and govern well, and that incrementalism is not the only way to work. That it is possible to move with a sense of urgency, acknowledging that things are urgent, that people need immediate relief. And this is going to be so major for working families across New York.
That's amazing. I mean, and this is a prime example of when, Mamdani was campaigning and people kept saying that that's impossible. His ideas, his proposals were impossible. And we can do anything we want to, considering what we normally give our money to in this country. We give hundreds of thousands of dollars to the military, to police, to foreign entities, and rarely do we reinvest that money in a good way into our communities, especially if we want to create a society where it's welcoming for women to want to have kids and to feel like they're raising kids who would have the full ability to get access to high quality education. So if your elected official is telling you something cannot be done, all you have to do is look around the country and see clear examples like in New York that not only can it be done, but it can be done utilizing our tax dollars in a really smart way. So I was very excited to see the news, especially, if I have a baby, damn, should I be moving back to New York? But no, the weather is too bad.
Do it.
Lies and deceptions. Back into the reality of a burning world. France is conducting military drills in Greenland. Now, on its face value, one could say, oh, that's no real news. But if you've been paying attention, and the talks and Donald Trump and JD Vance have continued to fuel the flames that the U.S. wants to acquire Greenland, hearing that as the tensions continue to grow, you have allies within NATO saying, like France, saying we'll do military operations and exercises in Denmark. It is sending a message to the United States that should you attack Denmark, should you try to acquire Greenland from Denmark, that there will be a swift response from NATO. And I think that is something we should all be concerned, because Trump is continuing to alienate us from our allies, while at the same time trying to start wars all over the country, all over Latin America and Europe and Asia. And so seeing France take this step of boosting its military presence close to Greenland, as you continue to see the conversation of acquiring Greenland being shot down by JD Vance, I think is a clear signal from the rest of the world that they're not going to allow the U.S. to continue to try to influence how other governments and countries are ran, and taking land from other countries for its own political gains.
Yeah, as they should. I mean, I feel like our goal right now is to decolonize the world. We're trying to tear apart these harmful empires that were, erected in the 1900s and earlier. We're trying to provide more independence to nations across the global South, not further colonize. And so I appreciate seeing the show of resistance. And let's be clear, this is not something that Americans support. Number one, we have plenty of land. We don't need any more space. We're not running out of space. CNN reported that 75% of Americans oppose the U.S. attempting to take control of Greenland. So who is he doing this for? And it's clear from Venezuela to Denmark to Greenland that the Trump administration is very self-serving right now and is trying to pack its coffers. And I'm just really, really nervous about the precedents that this is sending, that he can, build strategic partnerships in favor of his ballrooms, and that he can be gifted aircrafts, and that he can try and take over nations and take their oil and like build new colonies. Like, we're trying to free Puerto Rico. We're trying to free American Samoa. We're trying to free the Marshall Islands. We don't need more colonies. Exactly. So I just, I need us to wake our eyes up. And I know that in some ways we're preaching to the choir, because those listening are likely not those who voted for this man. But I mean, we've got to step up and do more, because the Republican Party is going to, we've got the midterms this year and presidential elections in 2028. We've got to get information.
And quick.
So, well, to end on some news that I would say really affirms how I'm feeling in this moment. We had the Golden Globes recently. There were some great moments. Tiana Taylor won a Golden Globe and gave a really beautiful speech. She looked gorgeous. K-pop Demon Hunters made some history with their awards. Sinners was snubbed in a lot of different categories, but ultimately did win in the category that honors like the biggest box office hits and impacts and things of that nature. But you still have this night of glitz and glamour while the country is on fire. And so I really appreciated Mark Ruffalo. He was being interviewed on the red carpet and was like, what do you think of this beautiful night? And are you having a good time? And he was just like, it is hard to pretend. Like, I love these people. I love this industry. I love storytelling. But to get dolled up and pretend as though this nation is not in a state of turmoil, to pretend that people are not fearing their lives, to pretend that we are not being terrorized in our communities, is something that he cannot do anymore. And I just really appreciated him bringing that sober sentiment, that like honesty to the table, because I don't think we want to see champagne glasses clinking when people are being shot by ICE, when law enforcement is being deputized to go door by door asking for our papers. Like, what is happening right now? So I'm really frustrated at the state of this country, but I appreciated him saying that, because it means that we're not alone in feeling what we're feeling, that those on all sides of the, economic, like those who are wealthier and celebrities are also paying attention to what we're paying attention to, and that there is a hunger to do something different. So when we come back from the break, we can dig into all of that for those who are curious, like, how do we even get here? There are a lot of issues that Americans have accepted is just how things have always been. ICE is younger than you and I, Jamira. Like, this is definitely a problem created.
Wrap it up.
So we can abolish the institution, and it is not something that's like, well, it's always been around. Please. I'm a millennial and I'm older than the institution of ICE. We can get this thing out of here. So when we come back from the break, we're going to dig more into the history and the context. And then we also have a really guest and legal scholar who's going to help us make sense of this moment. But you are watching The Other Side of Change only on the Black Star Network. So stay close.
They said the quiet part out loud. Black votes are a threat, so they erased them. After the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act in 2013, Republican legislatures moved fast. New voter ID laws, polling place shutdowns, purges of black voters from the rolls. Trump's Justice Department didn't stop it, they joined in. In 2018, his DOJ backed Ohio's voter purge system, a scheme that disproportionately erased black voters. Their goal, erase black votes and political power. Yeah, that happened. These are the kinds of stories that we cover every day on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Subscribe on YouTube and download the Black Star Network app. Support fact-based independent journalism that centers African Americans and the issues that matter to our community.
Welcome back to The Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network. Let's begin with human reality. In the last year, there have been numerous reports of people being detained by ICE who then became untraceable to their families, completely off the radar. Advocates say the system isn't merely failing to track people, it is designed to lose them. Families don't find out where their loved ones were taken for days, if at all. And in several cases, it took 3 to 5 days before the location of a detained family member was confirmed, and federal agencies offered little to no notice to those relatives.
And that's why it echoes true terror. If you look at the historical slave trade and slave catchers that were hired to retrieve people who had escaped bondage, they operated outside of clear legal due process and often without accountability. ICE current system where individuals are disappeared into detention centers with minimum information that is provided to the public, limited due process, if at all. And it resonates with that legacy of racialized pursuit and capture that has terrorized communities across the country.
Exactly. Yeah. And I really appreciate you making that comparison, because we don't need to look to Germany for examples of what this looks like in real time. This is baked into American history. It needs to not be, but it's also, this is not theoretical. I mean, in New Mexico, attorneys say that ICE disappeared 48 residents during a March 2025 enforcement action. These are people detained without clear record keeping or any timely family notification.
Which I just want to remind folks, we also have seen instances of fake ICE workers, because they're not showing their ID, they're wearing masks, who are trying to kidnap people off the street. This is the kind of ecosystem we have created. Los Angeles communities begin posting missing person posters across LA for people who have been taken by ICE with the headlines of abducted by ICE as a grassroots way of tracking disappearances and demanding accountability, because there is no clear system, there is no due process, there is no way of contacting your loved ones, and we're now being notified that ICE are turning people's phone on airplane mode to prevent families from actually tracking their whereabouts. Which is like, again, the intention is cruelty. The intention is to let people get missing in the bureaucracy. There's a college student that was kidnapped that's still in Venezuela because ICE accidentally abducted her and have not figured out a way to bring her back.
Yeah. And see, the thing is, to your point about cruelty being what their intention is, that means that abduction is, in some instances, one of the better case scenarios, because in others, detention is leading to death. The stakes are literally life and death. Between January 3rd and 9th, 4 migrants died while in ICE custody. It's part of a record surge in deaths in detention, the highest in 2 decades, even as more people are continuing to be detained under this increased federal funding. So it's terrifying to feel like being deported to a country you barely know, with your parents and loved ones not being able to find you and know where you are, could be one of the better case scenarios of finding yourself in ICE detention, because on the other end, you could literally lose your life.
Yeah, and as for the militarization, the trend is clear. In Minnesota, the federal operations known as Operation Metro Surge sent 2,000 immigration agents into Minneapolis as part of the Department of Homeland Security call for the largest immigration enforcement sweep ever, even as local officials question the legality of ICE's tactics. This is happening. And if you turned on your TV screen or looked at social media, they are using deadly force when engaging with protesters who are exercising their right to protest. That is their legal right.
Exactly. Yeah. And this is all happening in the same backdrop where George Floyd was killed, and the same backdrop where Philando Castile was killed. And so this deployment involving these heavily armed federal agents and these coordinated raids, it resembles the militarized policing we've seen across the board in these authoritarian states, where the state's tools of force are used to suppress, to intimidate, and to control populations, rather than to apply consistent legal standards. They are intentionally moving beyond. They're killing people and asking questions later, basically, so that they can avoid accountability. What they've done is done. There's no bringing people back to life, and it is not unlike the insane amounts of police brutality that we've been subject to for decades and centuries.
Yeah, and just 7 days into the new year, on January 7th, 2026, that military approach culminated in a tragedy that took the life of 37-year-old U.S. citizen Renee Nicole Good, who was fatally shot in the face by ICE during one of the enforcement actions in Minneapolis. The federal government called it self-defense, but video and expert analysis prompted protests and official condemnation that is happening as well. There is a local investigation that is happening with the local police, even though the federal government has denied, decided not to participate in an investigation as of now.
Yeah. And, the murder of Renee Good has really shaken people up and caused people to ask questions of, okay, we've been somewhat aware of the brutality that's happening in ICE detention centers, but the idea that ICE is patrolling the streets and killing U.S. citizens, U.S. residents, migrants, whoever, in the streets of the U.S. is causing extra concern. The reality that Renee Good being killed this year brought extra attention to the fact that a Black man named Keith Porter Jr. was also killed by an off-duty ICE agent on New Year's Eve, just before we hit 2026. And so this has all drudged up a lot more awareness of how big the problem is. Protests against ICE are spanning coast to coast now, from Minneapolis to LA to other small towns, with demonstrators demanding accountability, justice, and an end to ICE's presence in their communities, saying we don't need you. And it's not just protesters. I mean, seeing, politicians get up there and say it. The mayor of Minneapolis saying, get the fuck out of my city, and we don't need you, and this is bullshit. And I've seen the videos, and you're bringing more terror than safety. Governor Walz also speaking out. There is a clear feeling of people being fed up with this agency and realizing, like, well, what good are they doing? Do we need them at all?
And they're not. That's why comparing them to the historical practice aimed at controlling Black and brown bodies is not exaggeration. Like, slave catchers operated with impunity, capturing free and escaped Black slaves. Nazi-type unit tracked and detained and disappeared people based on identities. Today, federal enforcement actions in the U.S. borders are similar. They go unchecked. It's unchecked power, especially when due process is ignored and deaths occur in custody. I just saw an article that talked about how ICE is arguing in court that they should not be legally responsible for immigrants who are held in ICE facilities being sexually assaulted by ICE workers. There's also a video that's going around of an ICE worker taking a young lady into a porta potty, and she is held by her hands and with handcuffs, and they are justifying this. Right? They are creating an ecosystem where people are not only feeling unsafe, but are actually physically unsafe. People are dying in custody. People are going missing. Women and children are being sexually and physically assaulted. Those things are being documented. And yet the U.S. government is pretending like this is just normal. Nothing about this moment is normal. Nothing. They do not care whether or not you're a U.S. citizen. We've seen videos of ICE workers saying that your constitutional rights don't matter. You had J.D. Vance saying that ICE can operate with impunity. They are federal agents. They can do whatever they want. And it's like, at what point do we rein them in, right? You have even folks like Elizabeth Warren saying, I still support ICE with some limitations and some checks and balances. No, it's like these are broken systems. We can say that we need immigration enforcement without using tactics that have only been seen to escalate terror and harm. Violating immigration law is a civil matter. It's not a criminal matter that we should be separating families from children.
Right.
We should be harming individuals while in custody, and we should not be shooting protesters in broad daylight because they are exercising their constitutional rights.
Exactly. And I think that's why I'm so frustrated with how some of those senators, because even my senator, Raphael Warnock, said something similar online about, we need to control this brutality, but also support ICE in their efforts to legally address immigration. Like, no. Let's be clear. When we implement a program through the government does not mean it has to exist forever. We need to have the intelligence and the willingness to experiment and say, hey, this experiment is not working. Let's repeal it and figure something else out. To be clear, ICE was formed in 2003 on the aftermath of 9/11. Again, me and Jamira were already born. Like this is not some constitutional right that ICE has to exist. No, ICE is a program and an agency that was developed. And when it is not serving us, which it clearly is not, it can be repealed and pulled back and abolished. And that is the moment that I feel like we're in. And we need our leadership to admit that and to say, we tried it. We've had a good decades with ICE. It has done nothing but wreak havoc and make it harder for us to lean into a sort of ethos that we claim to have. And so we're going to try something new, and we're going to disband ICE, and we're going to do something else. There has been an America without ICE. There has been an America with ICE. And let me tell you, I don't want to be in America with ICE. So when we come back from the break, we're going to talk more with a brilliant legal scholar and Latina movement lawyer who's going to help us make sense of the last 22 years that we've spent with ICE as a U.S. federal agency and figure out how we work our ways out of this moment. But it's so important that you never believe the lie that we have to accept the way things are, because it can be different. And that is the whole point of the other side of change, because we are going to imagine what is possible on the other side. So stick with us and we will be right back.
We'll be right
Violent white supremacy is, quote, the most persistent and lethal threat in the homeland.
The greatest terrorist threat to the homeland is the homegrown violence stream, including hate crime committed on behalf of some kind of white supremacist ideology.
They are coming after everything in Black America. MAGA and Donald Trump are specifically targeting Black America. They are going after the money. Attack Black Lives Matter. Attack critical race theory. Attack woke, DEI. MAGA wants to defund Black America. This is a perfect example of their desire to completely degrade and de-emphasize Black people.
Welcome back to The Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network. Today, to help us unpack this moment and the frustrations that we're all feeling, we are joined by the brilliant Yvette. She's a lawyer and Latina legal scholar whose work focuses on immigration, civil rights, and due process. She's also the Laura E. Gomez Teaching Fellow on Latinx People and the Law at UCLA School of Law. She's the daughter of Salvadorian asylum seekers who fled the Civil War in the 80s and is the first person in her family to graduate from college. She earned a BA in American Studies with distinction from Yale College in 2014. She interned for Justice Sotomayor and graduated from Stanford Law in 2018, where she got to help pro se respondents in their deportation proceedings in southern Arizona. And then following that, worked as a civil rights attorney focused on border and immigration issues at the ACLU of Arizona for 2.5 years. So there is quite literally no one more qualified to dig into this conversation with us about the need to abolish ICE and to understand the legal precedents for the moment we're in. But it helps that she's also the incredible podcast host of Radio Cachimbona. Thank you for being with us, Yvette. Welcome to the show.
Yay! Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Brea. Thanks, Jamira. I'm so honored to be here and to talk about this really important topic today.
Important, sensitive, urgent, devastating. Yes, all the things.
Maddening. Yeah.
Yvette, we've heard stories, we've seen videos of people just simply disappearing in ICE custody. We know that loved ones have been trying to get in contact with their relatives. That has stalled due to the bureaucracy, due to the intentionality of keeping families away from their loved ones. Can you help us understand what is the legal mechanisms that is being used to make people untraceable, that we can all be aware of as we continue to try to protect our neighbors, protect our loved ones?
Whew. That is a big question that has a long story. So I think one of the big reasons that we're here right now is that the Supreme Court has disavowed its role as a protector of immigrants' rights, and it did
Yeah.
so pretty much since the beginning of immigration law. There's cases in the 1800s where the Supreme Court said, we don't want to involve ourselves in questions of immigration enforcement because these are quote unquote political issues. These are issues that implicate foreign policy. And so this really is something for the president to deal with and Congress. And the path that led us down is Congress passing very anti-immigrant laws in the late 1990s, including IRA, which created expedited removal, which is a fast-track deportation process, absolutely no due process. This is literally, someone getting arrested one afternoon and then being in Mexico the next morning, type of situation. And it's something that the Supreme Court has allowed to happen, and their excuse is that it's inappropriate for the Supreme Court to intervene because these are matters that implicate foreign policy, and therefore this is something that the president and Congress should deal with. And it turns out that when you leave the fate of immigrants in Congress's hand, they do things like create expedited removal and fund ICE for decades and decades. So that is, I would say, the bigger picture of how we've gotten to where we're at now. But there's like also another issue where, I guess, in line with the Supreme Court disavowing its role as a protector of immigrants, like it's even gone so far as to say that ICE officers have immunity from misconduct suits. So, and this is something that DHS was tweeting about recently. Earlier, they said, don't worry to the ICE officers, you have immunity for whatever happens while you're on duty. And this is something that is an issue with police officers as well. And so I think this group of people just feels like it's above the law, and it's a part of the culture of ICE to feel like, and Border Patrol to feel like they're above the law. And in many ways, they have been treated like they're above the law. So I would say that all those things together now contribute to a situation where people can be kidnapped in broad daylight and kept from family members. And what might be hard for people to understand is that in a technical sense, a lot of what's happening is legal. And that's not to say that it's right. It's just to point out that our legal system is super anti-immigrant and needs to change.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that sorry, go ahead, Jamira.
Oh, I'm a millennial, but clearly forget that I'm on mute. I was just going to say, I wanted to agree with the fact that we've created a culture where there's this hostility towards immigration, even though we as a society benefit immensely from the contributions of immigrants every single day. There's just this hatred that has been fueled by the government that these immigrants are taking your job or making you unsafe when the data doesn't support that. And I think that's one of the things that's really frustrating to watch it unfold over the last few months. It's just like this continued upward stream of divisiveness and hate and like kind of putting people against their own community members, even though we know the information is quite different than the reality is quite different than what the story we've been told.
Yeah. And I to co-sign that, but also to add, I appreciated you naming that a lot of what is happening is technically legal. I think that is a reminder that this is not a moment for civility or for trying to figure out solutions within the confines of what is legal, because the things that have been legal have often been harmful as hell to people who look like those of us on this call. And so the idea that the law will swoop in and save us, and people are just like, where's the checks and balances? And it's like,
We threw them
making
out
it
the window.
possible, like working in you know, in congruence with it to make it happen. And so kind of to that point, to get to another moment that was technically legal but we know needed to be upended, is the, you know, the era of enslavement. Comparisons to slave catchers and authoritarian enforcement are not just rhetorical, they really reflect how these state powers are operating. And from a legal perspective, you know, all of those things were also legal. So in your opinion, how do these comparisons between ICE and, you know, police and fugitive slave catchers and things like that hold up? And how is ICE's contemporary role shaped by this long history of racialized policing and capture?
Yeah, I would say there's a lot of threads to pull from, you know, just in, I mean, because police patrols developed out of slave catchers and trying to regulate people's bodies for the purposes of profit and capital. And I think that is very much the purpose of the very strict immigration enforcement system that we have now, which is one that creates illegality, quote unquote. You know, the US intervenes abroad and forces people to migrate up to the US and then doesn't give them any legal pathway to a worker visa or to citizenship. And so people are stuck in this perpetual limbo of oppression, and they're forced to survive at the margins of society. And for the purposes of having this labor force that is exploitable, that is vulnerable, and also that can be readily deported if, let's say, they start organizing for their rights. And I would also add that the police is a central mechanism to immigration enforcement, even though immigration enforcement is federal and state and local law enforcement is not charged with enforcing immigration law. The truth is that the police, in collaboration with the police, is necessary for ICE to deport people at the scale that it does. First, over half of the people that end up in detention end up there because of some kind of contact with the police, whether that be a traffic stop or calling the police for help. That is a big way that people are funneled into detention. And these collaborations have been occurring for a long time. Obama really championed these 287G agreements, which are basically contracts where local police will agree to enforce immigration law. And the way that it's done is just blatant racial profiling. And I think that there's a lot of parallels too, where at this point, it's not about illegal or like being enslaved or being free. It's about, are you a Black person? Are you a brown person? And it's just very blatant racialization. And I think this moment is showing us how, yes, race is a social construct, but also it has very real material consequences. And I think this moment is showing us how the law creates race. It means something different to be Latino right now, to be Somali, really to be like a person of color in the US right now. And I think it's an example of the creation of race. And that's always been Border Patrol and ICE's main purpose, is maintaining a predominantly white US.
Yeah, which is interesting, right? When you think about how they identify or how they even approach people to assume that they are illegal, it's to your point, like a racial profiling, because at no point do they care about the nearly 500,000 to 1 million white immigrants that are here illegally, right? White people don't get stopped on the side of the road and asked to show their papers, to show their identification. And to your point, it is a way of keeping America, it's getting America back to being white, regardless of who is harmed in the process and regardless of who's contributing to the culture and society that makes America what it is and could be.
And also just naming that like immigrant is being made synonymous with person of color to create that consistent othering, when it's like we have white immigrants all up and through this administration. Melania, Elon Musk, like there are so many right, exactly. Trump is the child of, but like that is being like obfuscated in the name of making, so now you have like US citizens, but because they are BIPOC, they are being terrorized, and like you're literally seeing people like having to like shout to bystanders like, I'm a citizen, I have paperwork. I mean, you have indigenous Americans being detained, like Native Americans being detained, and tribes not being able to get any sort of clarity around what's happening with those folks. So there's definitely this like dog whistle language that's happening to make us question the citizenship of anyone who is Black or brown or has various different features that make them look other, when we're turning an eye to those who are proudly not from this nation but are white.
The irony of America.
And I will say that this is true in the numbers, like in detention, Mexican and Central Americans are vastly overrepresented in detention centers. So their percentage is larger than what we would expect it to be given their overall size of the undocumented population. And for white immigrants, like Canadians and Europeans, like a significant portion of whom overstay their visas, they're underrepresented in detention centers. So it's literally true that it's not about legality or illegality. It's literally about race and keeping America white.
Yeah. So, for those who are watching this and who feel like this is absolutely overwhelming, I don't know what to do. People are listening who want to support their families and the loved ones or their neighbors, and challenging ICE's tactics or pursuing some sort of reform. Do you have any legal or organizing or community level recommendations to kind of give people hope to be able to think about where should they be focusing their energy on? Because we are seeing people come out on the street, right? We are seeing people hide their neighbors in their homes. We are seeing people block traffic with their cars. We are seeing people, do organizing. I can't remember what city they're in. Maybe it's Minneapolis, where you have bikers who are driving around town, buying up all the tamales so that those folks can stay home, but they're still making money. And I'm reminded that there are things that everyday Americans can do that doesn't require them to put their bodies at the front lines of protests, right? Even though we need them to do that too.
For sure. There's a lot of things I would say. So from the legal standpoint, I would say that habeas petitions have been pretty successful in getting people out. So one of the latest new levels of dystopia is that Trump has basically outlawed or made bond impossible for detained immigrants to receive. And so now people are facing the prospect of prolonged indefinite detention because of this, with no opportunity for bond. But people have found success through habeas petitions. So a bond you would ask, but as petitions you ask a federal judge for. And I was just talking shit about how the judiciary hasn't stood by immigrants, but I will say that there's some lower court judges who have done the right thing and who have recognized, like, ICE has no authority to continue detaining this person, like, please let them go. And this happened including in the case of my friend Luis, who was detained in late November. Horrific story where he was with his partner and his little baby, and they were flying to the Bay Area for a religious ceremony. And ICE accosted them and arrested him. And it was a shock because he's Cuban, and Cuba isn't accepting deportations. And so he had been just doing regularly scheduled ICE check-ins, and without notice, he was arrested. And a lawyer filed a habeas for him, arguing that that violated due process, that if you're going to take someone's liberty away, you have to at least give them the opportunity to fight back against that. And they didn't give that to him, so he was released. And I have heard of a few cases of success with habeas. So that's one legal mechanism, but we can't rely just on legal mechanisms. To Brea's point earlier, this is all technically legal. And so our solutions also need to be outside of the law as well. And I would say, so I'm really involved in a participatory defense hub in Tucson, Arizona. I would say, and there's over 40 hubs around the country, so it could be that there's one around you. I would say look it up, go on the participatory defense website and see if there's a group near you to join. Participatory defense is about having directly impacted people, whether that be through the criminal legal system or the immigration system, leading the charge for overthrowing these systems. And I think that is the future. That is the way to go. The people who understand the urgency of the need for change are the people who are really most directly impacted. And I think that's why they should lead. So I would say join a participatory defense hub if it's around you, or join any other community organizing group around you. I think there's like Detention Watch Network has great organizing groups. Just find a group that's already organized and join them. And then to your point, I understand that sometimes people feel scared of protest or confrontation. I mean, especially with the way that ICE is handling protests now, it is a risk to your physical safety to go out and protest. But there's so many ways that you can contribute. Once you've already joined a community organization, people need childcare, people need rides to court, or people need to accompanying someone to their ICE check-in, being a legal observer, documenting, even cooking for people, making meals, like the example that you gave of someone buying up all the tamales. I love this. I think there's a lot of creative solutions we can employ. I've also been really inspired by the people who use the whistles.
Yes, I just saw a video of that.
Yes, and a law professor friend of mine gave her students whistles at the end of the semester to remind them that the legal system is not the only way that we can intervene. It's everyday actions we can take like this. So yeah, I would say all of that. And I would say just try and fight against the overwhelm. I understand it. It's paralyzing, but we have to act. This is the time to act. And, there's groups waiting for people to join, and they're excited to have you. So if you've ever wanted to get more involved in community organizing, but you were a little shy or whatever, I think now is the time to do it.
Yeah, that's so real.
I love that. Thank you for offering those different ideas, because I think people do need creative ways of imagining their role. And I think, the murder of Renee Good has people concerned of how they show up with the different risks that they can or cannot take. And so I love the range of offerings that you added, and to kind of ground us and in what we're working towards, given that recent fatal shooting, given the lack of transparency around investigations. What does accountability look like in these sorts of enforcement actions? What are our protests supposed to be in service towards? What are we building towards? Because sometimes we show up to a protest and we know we want to do something, but we don't know what world we're building towards. So what needs to change in regards to ICE, in your opinion?
I'm an abolitionist, and I do think that ICE doesn't need to exist.
Period.
I guess we didn't explicitly get into the history of it, but it's a pretty recent phenomenon. It was created post 9/11. And so anyone who was born before that lived in a world without ICE. But I think in terms of accountability, that's such a tough question, especially as an abolitionist, because I don't think the solution is like prosecuting people either. But I think there needs to be, the first thought that comes to mind is like a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. These things that happen after war crimes, or like serious crimes against humanity. There's like a tribunal where the purpose of it is really to try and get to the truth of what happened. And I'm Salvadoran, and that was something that I think did help heal the post-war generation, is the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that put out a report and said, like, yes, the military was responsible for the vast majority of crimes during this time. You know, things, especially in this, we're in this era of intense propaganda, right? Yeah. And so, like, there's competing truths out there, or there's like people trying to sell a false truth. And I think a necessary part of healing is everyone getting on the same page about what really happened. And that feels like such a monumentous feat right now, because like I feel like we've been living in like a post-truth era for a few years, you know, especially with like things like with the internet and like deep fakes, and it can feel impossible to arrive at truth. But I think that something like that is necessary to heal these deep wounds, especially considering the fact that the majority of ICE and Border Patrol agents are actually Latino. And so there needs to be like deep inter-community healing. And I think, I'm not sure if I've ever seen like the accountability process that can get us there yet. I think we might have to create it, but there needs to be like a serious coming to the table and like people admitting that what they did was wrong. And trying to come up with solutions to avoid this ever happening again.
No, that's so real. And I thank you for that answer, because you're right. Punishment doesn't always get us to the solution of the world that we want to make. And we need to think about more creative ways of how we can have that healing and reconciliation. But it first has to start with us admitting to the truth of what is actually happening and has happened to our immigrant brothers and sisters. So I appreciate that. How can folks stay in contact with you? How can folks continue to learn from you and to continue to follow your work?
Well, you can listen to the Radio Cachimbona podcast. It's on Apple, Spotify, or wherever else you listen to podcasts. And you can follow.
It's so good. Listen, y'all, it's so good.
Brea's been a guest of mine in the past.
I definitely have to download it.
And you can follow at Radio Cachimbona on Instagram, X, and Facebook. And my email's radiocachimbona@gmail.com if folks want to reach out directly.
Awesome. We thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, y'all. This was so lovely. Thanks for having me.
We'll have you back.
Definitely. Oh, great.
Yes, for sure. For sure.
So many good gems. So many good gems.
Bye.
Bye.
Yvette, I so appreciate her all the time. She just gives all the context that I need, and it's so grounded in like all of her
expertise. And her voice is very calming and soothing, which I think helps in a topic like this. Yeah. It was like, okay, take a deep breath. You know, this is heavy stuff.
Yeah, it's like ASMR version of how do we abolish ICE. So, you know,
wrap it up, throw them out the window. Exactly.
Well, speaking of wrapping it up, we are about to close out this episode after we get back from the break. So we're just going to go on a quick break. You are watching The Other Side of Change only on the Black Star.
They said the quiet part out loud. Black votes are a threat, so they erased them. After the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act in 2013, Republican legislatures moved fast. New voter ID laws, polling place shutdowns, purges of black voters from the rolls. Trump's Justice Department didn't stop it, they joined in. In 2018, his DOJ backed Ohio's voter purge system, a scheme that disproportionately erased black voters. Their goal, erase black votes and political power. Yeah, that happened. These are the kinds of stories that we cover every day on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Subscribe on YouTube and download the Black Star Network app. Support fact-based independent journalism that centers African Americans and the issues that matter to our community.
Welcome back to The Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network. The crisis of people going missing in the name of immigration reform is a humanitarian crisis, a civil rights issue, a reflection of how power has been militarized in this country.
And when the state deploys force without transparency, due process, or accountability, whether that be in past eras or today, communities of color are always the ones who pay the highest price.
Which is why we all have to lean in this moment and speak up and do what we can from our positions of power, whether small or large acts of kindness. For resources, we recommend organizations like the ACLU, Disappeared in American Progress. The ACLU, Disappeared in American Project, the Immigrant Justice Center, and the American Friends Service Committee working to locate loved ones in detention.
And like Yvette had offered up, find local groups that are resisting. We always talk about not complying in advance, and this is the moment to resist. If you or someone you know is affected by immigration enforcement, contact legal aid groups, document everything, and connect with local advocacy coalitions who are committed to transparency, dignity, and justice. You've been listening to The Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network. Until next time, stay informed, stay compassionate, and keep pushing for justice. Bye, y'all.